Welcome back to Learn SKN, and today we are back with a lecture video, this time for Principles of Business in Section 9 of the syllabus. So Section 9 of the Principles of Business syllabus, role of the government in an economy. In this section, students should be able to outline the responsibilities of government in an economy. They should also be able to describe how government can influence businesses to protect the environment. They should be able to state the purposes of taxation, and they should also be able to distinguish between direct and indirect taxes, and they should also be able to describe the forms of assistance offered by the government to businesses and discuss the social services provided by the government. So a fairly short section for this in the syllabus, and some of it is basically, a little commonsensical. That's why I was reluctant to do this video, because some of these things already, but for those who don't, I'll just steer them a little into this line of thinking so they can be able to expound in case they get a question asked on the role of the government. But for the most part, these are things that general knowledge would be able to tell you. Nevertheless, we're going to jump right into it. Again, we're using the textbook, the Principles of Business CSEC examination textbook, and there's an e-copy available online that you can purchase. All right, so the role of the government in an economy. Now, the government has a lot of roles that they play within the economy, and there are some primary roles that they play that are crucial to the overall running of an economy. And some of these include national security, healthcare, education, social safety net, national insurance, environmental protection, infrastructure. Also, they have to manage the economic aspects of the country, the economic aspects of the country, such as the monetary policy, fiscal policy, exchange rate policy, assistance to business. And outside of the economic management, you have security at work, investor security. So all these are some of the major responsibilities that the government has on a whole. Now let's just look at the textbook and what they say here. All right, so one of the major and obvious roles of the government would be security of the state. Now, state security. Now, the government would be the one in charge of both the internal and external state of security for the country. Now, we all know that the police force is normally a part of the government structure, the government system, because it would be very difficult if the police force was privatized. Now, could you imagine a private police force who would only answer to calls from persons who can afford to pay? So you're getting robbed, you poor, you cannot call the police because they are private, you cannot pay for it, so therefore that's it, dog, eat your supper. So the government has responsibility to protect all of the citizens, and as such, the national defense is in the purview of the government for the most part. Of course, you have your renter cops, you have your local security guards, but of course, the security guards are not police, and so their responsibilities do not extend beyond protecting whatever premises they're in charge of protecting. So the government is the one in charge of the police force, the defense force, the military, the army, what have you. So they are in charge of your internal security. They are the ones who set the laws and put the systems in place to make sure that the laws are being upheld. So you have your Coast Guard, you have your probation services, you have your prison system, the judicial system, all those, the fire services, disaster relief and planning organization. So all those are part of the overall state security that the government is in charge of. Those are internal. Then you would have some that are external, where the government would be the ones in charge of basically diplomacy. So the government would be the ones who reach out to foreign countries, foreign government, to make sure that everything is on level, make sure that our countries are getting along nicely, so that there are no confusion, there's no issue between nations and countries. The government is the one who has to ensure that. No private citizen has the authority to go out and negotiate on behalf of the government. The government is the one who handles both internal and external security. So those are responsibilities of the government. So you have your ambassadors and you have things like that. All right. Then, of course, the government has to protect the general welfare of its citizens. What they have here. For businesses to be productive, reliable energy supplies, adequate water and sanitation, and the infrastructure necessary to transport people and goods are crucial. Another key area is social investment or welfare to ensure that adequate housing, healthcare, and food provision. So all these are what the government is also in charge of. They are the ones who are in charge of the healthcare system. They are the ones who are responsible for stimulating the economy so that you can have people offering employment to the citizens. Of course, education. The government is the one who invests the highest in education. They are the ones who oversees the education system within a country. Of course, you have private schools and stuff like that. But for the most part, most schools are government-owned, government-run, especially in the Caribbean region. Majority of the schools are part of the government system. Because, as I said before, the job of the government is to look out for its citizens. So could you imagine that all schools were private and you cannot afford to enter a private school? What happened to you? You're going to be uneducated. So the poor in your nation is going to be uneducated. If same thing for healthcare. If you cannot afford to go to the free health center, the free clinic, the government sponsored hospitals, then what happened to you? The poor would suffer greatly because they cannot afford to pay their health bills and stuff like that. So the government is responsible for all those general welfare, the general welfare of the population, transportation, roads, the infrastructure, roads, airport, bridges, all those things are the responsibilities of the government. They have to install these things, invest in these things so that they can encourage investment and they can make sure that the health and wealth of the citizens are being taken care of. So a lot of people love to talk about big government and the anti-government and this and what and the other. But the reality is, a lot of these billionaires out there, they only became billionaires because they used infrastructure that was put in place by the government. They did not install the roads, the bridges, the electric posts, all those things. They were there and they used those to make their billions, and then they want to talk about government too big and government could keep out of the business, etc., etc. All right. You had examples in America where, before when Ford had his car, the government invested in roads, and because the investment in the roads, people demanded more cars, and so of course they became billionaires because of that. So the government is key to all of these things working out nicely for a lot of these businesses out there. Of course, again, government in charge of water and sanitation, and of course the power grid. Most of the electricity departments are government owned or they are nationalized. So the government still has their hands somewhere in the pot when we're looking at most of our utilities such as water and electricity. Not internet per se, but water and electricity especially, the government would ensure that all those are available for people to take part of. And of course, employment laws in general, the judicial system, the government is the one who oversees all those things. What if there were no employment laws? I mean, it would have been another form of slavery or something. People pay you what they feel like. They make you work for whatever hours they feel like and those kind of things. They fire you without any reason. Right now, reason to fire you. You don't even know why, because they don't have to pay any money, any severance, nothing like that. So job security would have been at an all-time low had the government not implemented employment laws and rules that would keep people a little more secure on their job. You can be pregnant and you go on maternity leave, you have sick leave, you should expect that the job is there for you because they can't just fire you just willingly like that. Alright, there need to be justifiable reasons why somebody chooses to fire you, and all that is because the government has laws in place that would protect all of us here as it relates to workers. Then, of course, laws are also in place to protect the environment. The government has to protect the environment. The environment is key to ensuring that we have a safe and healthy general population. So you can't just have people dumping what they feel like anywhere. You need to have protection out there. So you have laws to protect the environment from potentially harmful impacts of businesses such as water pollution, air pollution, contamination by hazardous chemicals and general waste. Because the reality is, it's cheaper for certain companies to just dump their stuff anywhere they want to, in the water, in the ocean, in the river. It's cheaper. Okay, it's cheaper, but because the government is there and they try their best to hold up all the laws to protect the environment, we have a cleaner air to breathe, cleaner water to drink, and things like that. So the government is key to all of that. Imagine it was a wild west out there with the businesses just dumping their residue and the debris and all that stuff anywhere they want to. You know, in the ocean, in the rivers, in the lakes, killing off the fish, destroying the soil nutrients and stuff like that. That's not a good thing. So it's a good thing that the government is there, and one of their responsibility is to, of course, keep environment nice, safe, and protected. So environmental protection is also another responsibility of the government. All right, good. Also, other responsibilities of the government includes things such as the economy. Right, they have to maintain a safe environment for investors. What does this mean? Interest rates should be kept at a certain level. If the interest rates are too high, you might run potential investors. If it's too low, they might take advantage of your country and basically, exploit your country. So you have to make sure that the interest rates are in a way that, can encourage investment, can encourage people to spend money on equipment and machinery to invest so that they can in turn provide jobs. Then you have, of course, government idea to provide tax incentives for companies. Tax incentives such as, a little subsidy here, a little tax holiday there. If you are using green energy, they might give you a tax break because you're trying to promote environmentally friendly practices as a business. So tax incentives can boost fledgling markets. A good example of this is solar power industry. Tax incentives are encouraging entrepreneurs to start new solar powered businesses, and there are incentives to encourage small businesses and families to purchase solar equipment. So you get a little tax write-off, a little reduction on the tax you have to pay if you take part in certain environmentally friendly or certain activities that government are promoting. For example, if you want to work in agriculture, the government might say, okay, to encourage production of food, we're going to allow you to bring in, 2 pickup trucks, a tractor, whatever, at a very, very, very reduced rate and things like that. So the government is there to make sure that there's a safe environment for investors. And it's not only economically. Safe environment for investors also mean, crime rate low and that kind of stuff. Because nobody wants to invest in an area where the crime is high, and as soon as you put in a window or a door, it's smashed. Or you bought something, somebody robbed you. That's not very, good for environment, good for investors. Nobody gonna really want to do that. So countries that have, political instability, you tend to realize that investors would flee those countries because your investment might get destroyed and you will have no returns on your investment. So you don't want that. So the government also have to maintain a safe environment for investors, not only on an economic front with interest rates, tax incentives, and policy contract laws and stuff like that, but also with, of course, safeguarding the life and the livelihood of the investors. All right, other ways that the government can create a good incentive for businesses is to offer grants, subsidies, loans, etc. So a grant would be financial. It's not a loan because you don't have to pay it back, but a financial incentive that is given to a business. You don't have to pay it back. So for example, if you want to invest in green energy and the government have a promotion to promote green energy, then they can give you, let's say, a $10,000 grant to build a solar farm or something like that. That's money you don't have to pay back. It's a grant. But then they can offer what you call soft loans. Those are loans that are at a very low interest rate. That would also encourage people to invest in certain energies, certain industries, and things like that. And of course, you have subsidies. And subsidies is also a way in which the government can help to reduce the overall production costs in certain industries. Again, our popular industry would be the agricultural industry. The government offers a lot of incentives to farmers to bring in the equipment, all the inputs and stuff like that, so that they can have a lower production cost when compared to overseas producers, so that they can actually compete on price on the local market. So subsidies are just financial aid that the government offers to people in business or in production to help to stimulate business activities, to help you to encourage certain business activities. So you have grants, subsidies, loans, and disbursements. Of course, the government is in charge of regulating the businesses. All right, so government impose rules called regulations on businesses to affect how they are run. They affect every aspect of running a business, including health, safety, premises, working conditions, exporting goods, accounting, and protecting the environment. So all these are similar again to laws. So these are rules or laws that the government put in place to control, well, not control, but to try to navigate the way in which, try to manipulate the way in which businesses run their activities. Because the reality is we don't really want a business just having poor working conditions. There are certain things in place, certain rules in place where the government would insist that certain safety precautions are taken before a business can open. You must have a fire extinguisher or a smoke detector, or people must wear hard hats, etc., etc. So these are safety regulations on both the person and on the premises. All right, so these are rules that the government put in place to regulate or to control or to manipulate the way in which businesses conduct their activities. Exporting rules, you can't just export anything. Same way you cannot import anything. There are rules as to what you can import, how much you can import or export, and things like that. Accounting, of course, you have heard about so many scams in accounting, but the government have certain rules in place that says that businesses should show certain things on their books. They should, not just hide, money here, there, everywhere. There's certain accounting principles and practices that the businesses must follow based on the government rules and regulations to be, above table, to be above the level. We don't want anybody stealing and, tax. You don't want to pay your tax in full and those tax evasion and things like that. We don't want that. So the government have certain accounting practices in place that would ensure that the businesses are doing what they should on the up and up and not embezzlement and things like that going on. All right, so the regulations, the rules, the government ensure that there are certain rules that pertain to the business environment. For example, government may rule that only certain types of enterprise can trade in some residential areas to control noise levels and traffic. So that comes down to things like zoning. The government would be in charge of putting zones like industrial parks, like certain businesses cannot operate in residential areas because maybe chemicals being spewed, the stench being released from certain business activities, things like that. So zoning is also part of the regulatory body that the government has in place to control or to facilitate business activities. All right, so those are also responsibilities of the government. And so, as you can see, like I said before, a lot of the things that the government is in charge of are pretty, commonsensical. You can see them every day. You know them. You don't really have to think too hard as to what are the responsibilities of the government. And of course, we mentioned political stability before, where that can aid in creating an environment that is beneficial for investors. So these are other list of responsibilities here. Government may also provide clear guidelines for startups. This ensures that new businesses are regulated from the very beginning. Individuals or groups wanting to set up a new business need to follow rules that include the following areas: type and structure of the business they are operating in, example, a sole trader, limited company, or whatever. Registering the business, obtaining license and permit, having adequate insurance and protecting consumers, premises, storing personal information, employing people, paying taxes. So all these are also regulations that the government insists that businesses have to abide by if they are to operate within an economy, within a country. Of course, you cannot just have a sole trader and operating like a company. There are different taxes, tax brackets, different rules that apply to a sole trader versus a limited company or partnership. That is why you have to license, register your business and things like that so the government know what they're dealing with. You can't say you're a small business and you have 500 workers, and then you're getting the benefits of a small business. That cannot work. So you have to register, license, and things like that. Part of the regulatory body that the government has in place to protect and to make sure that businesses are doing what they have to do, how they should be done. All right. So all these are, again, responsibilities of the government to the economy. And of course, we discussed protecting the environment already, where the government has rules in place so that the environment is not depleted, is not taken advantage of for the sake of profit. All right, decisions and actions taken by some businesses may fail to take account for the impact they have on the natural environment, communities, and other businesses. Some businesses may deliberately ignore this, while others may lack information on how they can reduce the negative impact and the benefits of doing so. All right, so we already went deep into the environmental aspect of the government's responsibility, finding alternative to fossil fuels to generate energy, improving energy efficiency, those kind of things. You would realize that some of the equipment that they use, some of your appliances would have a certain, level of energy use. The government insists that your, for example, the government would insist that cars not burn a certain amount of fuel, so the fuel efficiency of the cars are regulated by the government in certain countries, because you don't want the car to spewing all kind of toxins into the air just like that. You have to regulate all of that. So you don't want the environment to be destroyed at the sake of making a profit. So government have rules in place to protect all of those things. So what the government sometimes does is, the government, in order to encourage people to protect the environment, as I said before, the government would offer incentives in the form of maybe grants, subsidies, loans, and those kind of things in order to encourage businesses to go the right way. For example, green technology. That's where you're trying to protect the environment using sustainable technologies. Things like, solar panels, hydroelectricity. You see, Tesla receive a large amount of monies from the government in order to pursue the electric vehicle dreams, because the government know that if this comes to fruition, then that would reduce pollution substantially. So the government offers incentives for businesses who are engaged in green technology uses, even reforestation, where you replant trees. The government offers incentives, or not only incentives, but they also put rules and regulation in place where if a company is engaged in, timber production and stuff like that, they have to replace the trees that they would have cut down. Now, the government shouldn't be the one telling them to do reforestation. For their own business to survive, they know they need to repopulate the forest that they would have torn down before. So that's basically it for the responsibilities of government in terms of things like, regulations and rules and laws and stuff like that. Alright, so that's basically it for this aspect of the role of the government in the economy. Alright, so we go to the list again. The government have responsibilities for national security, healthcare, education, social safety net, national insurance, environment, infrastructure, economic management, also like monetary policy, fiscal policy, exchange rate policy, assistance to business. Then you have security at work and investor security. All right, so those are the major responsibilities of the government. But before we finish, let me expound a little further on the economic management as it relates to the government's responsibility. So we see here we have monetary policy, fiscal policy, exchange rate policy, assistance to businesses. We already covered assistance to businesses. That's the part where we looked at the subsidies, the grants, the soft loans, the disbursement, those kind of things. That's where we look at those things, right? So that's here, the grants, subsidies, loans, and disbursements. Now, if we're looking at the monetary policy, now the monetary policy comes under the the interest rates. Interest rates is how the government would control the money supply. So that's one way the government controls the money supply via the interest rates. So the interest rate is one of the tools that the government uses to control the money supply within an economy. They can either increase the interest rate or decrease the interest rate. But only government has the responsibility of doing that, increasing the interest rates or reducing the interest rates. And they do that via whatever their central bank is, whether it is, for example, in the Caribbean, in the OECS, you have the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. In Trinidad, you have the Bank of Trinidad, the Bank of Guyana, Bank of Jamaica, whatever. So they are a creature of the government. So the government is responsible for ensuring that the economy is running smoothly based on the monetary policies that they implement, whether to increase the interest rate to try and reduce inflation or decrease the interest rate to try and spur demand within the economy. Same thing here, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is where it's all about the government's borrowing and spending, and those is borrowing, spending, and earning of money. So the government uses taxation as the main source of earning revenue, and so the government can use tax as a tool to, whether encourage or dissuade certain business activities. They can increase tax here, decrease tax there, tax holidays, tax incentives. So that's where that came into play. The tax incentive would be that aspect of the fiscal policy. All right, the tax incentive is that aspect of the fiscal policy. They can use taxes to, control business activity, and that's a role of the government to make sure that the taxes and the borrowing is not out of control, because borrowing is also a part of fiscal policy, and the borrowing would, affect how much national debt a country has, and that can in turn affect the citizenship, whether positively or negatively, depending on the level of national debt. When talking about exchange rate policy, we're looking at things like the rate at which your currency exchanges with another foreign currency. And so the government has the responsibility of making sure that their currency is on a competitive level, not too high, not too low, that kind of stuff. Or they can put it however they want it, once it's best for the country. So if they see it fit to have it devalued, that would encourage, help the country, or have it more valuable than other currencies, then they would do that, whatever they choose to do, what's best for the country. So they are the ones who are in charge of the exchange rate policy, exchange rate system. And of course, we always look at assistance to business. All right, so that's basically it for the business and the role of the government. The next video we're going to look at would be taxation, and looking at how taxation can be used by the government to achieve certain objectives. So the next one will be on taxation. All right, so that's it for now for this aspect, the role of the government. So you know what to do. You click the like button, you subscribe, and you share. All right, so school is back in session, so it's time to get back into the lectures for the various subject areas, mostly POB, economics, and agricultural science. So look forward for those other videos coming up. But the only way to know when they drop on Learn SKN is, of course, to be a member of the channel by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell, so that you know when Learn SKN would have dropped another video. All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.